Thrilled to have you with us today, from across the state. I'm calling in from South Sullivan's Island, and Debbie's up in Greenville, and Alex is in Columbia, and our guests are in Greenville, and that's the community we're going to be focusing on today. If you will please share in the chat box, as Alex has asked you to do, your name and where you're calling in from, your organization, that would be fantastic. It would give our speakers a chance to know with whom they're talking. The mics are muted, but we will be inviting questions, I believe, toward the end, and so share those in the chat box. We're still at, I'm going to give it another minute or two for people to come in, because I don't want anyone to miss my introduction of Miss Megan Bart. We are thrilled that she has joined us, because our speakers, David and Merle, are two of her United Way volunteers, longtime volunteers, and this work, I think, got its start around a coffee table with Megan and some colleagues. So, Alex, you think everyone's in?
We're about 80% there.
Okay, I'll give it another minute or two. Okay. So today we have Debbie, is this our 15th Removing Our Blinders session? We've been doing these since September of 21, and we are thrilled to have with us two community leaders who've been working collaboratively on a project that the Greenville community started. And to introduce them is Megan Bart. Megan, you've been at the United Way of Greenville since 2018, I think, right?
Yeah, 4 years this month.
Wow, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
It will be 10 years before you know it, and don't be there before then. We are thrilled that Megan chose to relocate, bringing her United Way experience from other parts of the country to Greenville, and she has rapidly embraced the community and become a leader there. I think you were one of the recent 50 leaders that the Business Journal profiled, and congratulations on that. But I want to take this moment to also publicly thank Megan for something that she's done collaboratively with Together as C. As hopefully many of you know, we announced last week that we are launching an association healthcare plan. After 25 years of trying to make this effort happen, at last we are able to do it thanks to some changes in the rules and Blue Cross Blue Shield's willingness to partner with us, and Megan's willingness to be the first customer. So, you know, Megan, when I read your bio and it talked about the many collaborative efforts you've done, I had to say, I know, I agree, she's collaborating with us. So thank you for that. And will you please tell our guests a little bit about how this got going and what these two terrific men have been doing with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Madeline. Good morning. It's nice to see so many familiar faces on the call today and some new ones as well. I am very passionate about this topic, and you are about to hear from two incredible community leaders and their passion as well. And it's my pleasure to introduce both of these gentlemen this morning. The first is David Lominack, who is the market president of South Carolina for TD Bank, where he is responsible for commercial banking throughout the state. David, you've been part of TD Bank, or Carolina First, back in the day since 1997, and have held multiple roles over the years in many different markets for TD. And we're lucky to have you based in Greenville with the oversight of the state. I could go on and on about your bio and Merle's as well, but that would take up our entire time. On a very personal level, I will say that, David, you were my first board chair here in Greenville at United Way. You continue to serve on the United Way board. And one of the things that I appreciate the most is that you also, in your role, have community at the center of all that you do. And that's a really valuable role that you play personally, in not just Greenville, but statewide in all that you do. And that certainly ties into race equity as well, which I'll share a little bit more about in a moment. And then also Judge Code, Merle Code, thank you for joining this morning. Merle, you are an attorney at the law office of Ogleetree, Deakins, Nash, Smoke, and Stewart, and you have been an active board member of over 30 organizations. your list of credentials around the role that you've played in community, in the role that you played in many of our organizations, including the first African-American chair of United Way of Greenville County's board back in the day. You have paved the way for so many in all that you have done in our community. You've started many, many businesses in Greenville and beyond. And I would say there is no person more passionate about what's possible in Greenville and the surrounding area than you, Merle. And I appreciate your leadership in so many ways. Both of these gentlemen this morning are going to talk about our Race, Equity, and Economic Mobility Commission. We've been at this work for about 20 years, and Madeline, or 20 years. It feels like 20 years sometimes, guys. 20 months we've been at this 20 months. Here's what I will say to you, Madeline, you referenced this, that this was a conversation that started with leaders here in Greenville. And how it really started was I had chatted with both Carlos Phillips and Sean Dogan just about the state of our nation and all of the racial inequities and the murders that were happening around our country, namely around George Floyd, and just calling them up human to human saying, gosh, how are you doing? And that started a conversation around, let's write an op-ed and a call to action for our community that we need to do something. We need to do something in Greenville and Greenville County to ensure that we are coming together around solutions before we have a real crisis moment that many other communities had experienced. And that call to action turned into a moment where we said, wait a minute, this call to action is to us as leaders of these organizations. So the Chamber, United Way, and the Urban League of the Upstate partnered together to form the REEM Commission. And it was very quickly apparent as we thought about who would be best suited to be co-chairs of this effort. We had a very short list and it had 2 names on it. And those 2 names were David and Merle. And both of you were kind enough to say, we are passionate about this. We believe that the time is now, and we will roll up our sleeves to do the very hard work that is both personal to both of you, but also, I would say, a non-negotiable of our community. And it has been such an honor and a pleasure to serve with both of you. This has been a very thoughtful and I would say real journey that we've had, because we scrap often as a group of leaders around this work, but I couldn't imagine 2 better partners to co-chair this important work. And thank you so much for being willing to share that story today with this group of leaders around the state as well. And I will turn it over to both of you.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you, Megan. Good morning to everybody. And it is neat to see a lot of familiar names from across the state that joined this morning. So thank you for being with us. And I hope this will be a great conversation. I'm going to let Merle start us off and just to kind of give you a quick overview of how we'll do this. Merle and I will go back and forth, kind of talking about Rheem, talking about personal experiences in Greenville County and the upstate of South Carolina. You're welcome to put questions in the chat. I don't know that Merle and I are competent enough to keep up with those while we talk. So we will definitely have time at the end and hope folks will engage and ask some questions or challenge or whatever you'd like to do. But we'll definitely have some time at the end. So I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and let Merle kick us off. Merle, good morning.
Good morning, David, and good morning to all of you on this Zoom call. I am honored to have an opportunity to speak with you about an issue that is as close to my heart as one could be. Let me start off by giving you a little bit of my background. So hopefully you'll understand why I am what. My father was one of 10 children. He was born in 1911. His father was born in 79 or 80, right after all of the issues of Civil War and slavery. Of those 10 brothers and sisters, or 9 brothers and sisters that my father had, I only knew one, because 9 of his brothers and sisters didn't get to grow up in the same household he did. In those days, folks got shipped off all kinds of places, and my father's brothers and sisters, whom some of them I've never met, cousins I don't know, were sent across the country during that period of time. But I grew up, my father attended Benedict College and got his master's degree from University of Michigan. My mother attended South Carolina State College, where she was a basketball and track participant and on scholarship. So education was important in my home. Sports was important in my home, and the two mutually existed. My folks didn't hear, oh, you can't do anything because I'm so tired. They were not listening. So it drove me to be as good as I possibly could be in whatever I did. But let me share with you, and I'm gonna get back to all this, and I can talk, so y'all keep a time on me and get me off this phone. But let me tell you, I watched my daddy.
Well,
I watched my father. He was the principal of the high school that I attended and superintendent of all Black schools in Oconee County. And I watched how he interacted with people, and I watched how people interacted with him. And it was mutual respect. This guy was special. My father was a giant of a man, 5'5". Little fella with a big heart and a big brain, and knew how to talk to and engage people in the issues of our day. So he was the man in my hometown. So the governor and senators who were coming to Oconee County came to see my daddy all the time. And my daddy would make me come out and meet them and offer them something as refreshment. But he was teaching me about how you treat human beings. After that governor left, a derelict came to my door, smelling of alcohol. And my daddy brought him into the house, sat him in the same seat the governor sat in. And I had to get that gentleman some refreshments, as I did for the governor. My father never told me why he did that, but I know. You treat every man with respect because you don't know every man's story. I'm telling you all of this to give you an idea of how whatever I am got to be. As a result of my father and his relationship with the community in Oconee County, primarily white, he was engaged in all kinds of activities that involved uplifting of people, and he could always reach out to those folks who came to see him to help. As a result of that, a relationship grew. I'm going to tell you one story, and I'm going to stop and give it over to Dave.
Merle, hey, Merle, I think you accidentally hit the mute button. There you go.
Are we better?
Yeah. You were just about to start your story, and I think you accidentally hit the button.
Thank you. As a result of that, there were 3 Black doctors in Seneca, South Carolina, 2 Black dentists, and a Black pharmacist in a town of less than 5,000 people. The reason for that was there was a Black junior college in Seneca, South Carolina. And so the most educated folk in Oconee County were Black, PhD professors and the like. When that school closed in the early 1940s, all of those folks stayed there. And as a result of that, they engaged in the first elementary school and primary school of teaching us. And I was a recipient of that. We didn't play with blocks. These folks were college educated professors, and they challenged our mind. As a result of that, my kindergarten class got 2 orthopedic surgeons. They are chemists all over the place because they challenged us early. And as a result of that, in 1983, listen to what I'm telling you. In 1983, as a result of that relationship, the chief of police in Seneca, South Carolina was Black. The city manager of Seneca, South Carolina was Black. The postmaster for Seneca, South Carolina was Black. 2 members of city council and a member of the school board, because of the relationship that had grown from folks who got to know one another. That's how my passion began. I realized when you introduce people to each other, get to know one another, some of the minute issues get put aside. David, you want to pick up from there?
I will. So we've had a joke since Merle and I started working together on Rheem that I always hate following Merle, because I know everybody on this line would much rather listen to him for the next 45 minutes than me be any part of it. And that's okay. I feel the same way. I'd rather listen to him too. Let me give you a little bit of additional background on the formation of Rheem, what we've been doing, how we've attacked the work in this community. And it's actually interesting to see we've got a few of our REEM commissioners on the line today. So hopefully maybe at the end, they will feel comfortable chiming in on their personal experiences in this journey too. So you heard Megan say that we started this journey in August of 2020, and it was the result of the three CEOs of United Way, Greenville Chamber, and Urban League of the Upstate. And then Merle and I got engaged, and 35 commissioners came to the table from across this community representing law enforcement, education, the nonprofit sector, the public sector, the business community, healthcare. I mean, you name it, we've got representation on this commission. And, you know, interestingly enough, we thought, okay, we got together in August of 2020 and we said, okay, let's, you know, between now and December 31st of 2020, let's put together some recommendations and then we'll be set, right? Well, clearly about 2 months into this work, we went, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure 4 months is going to be enough time. We need about 10 years. So I will say that we asked all 35 commissioners to, at a minimum, give us another year until December 31st of 2021, and every one of them graciously agreed to do that. But in our early meetings, you know, Merle talked about relationship building, and we really spent some time trying to get to know each other and establish those relationships that are important when talking about this work. The other thing we did that I think was really important is we really grounded our work in the data. So on our website, which is reemgvl.org, you will see a racial equity index. I'm holding it up here, that the United Way commissioned in 2019, that basically looks at race and economic mobility in Greenville County, okay? And we really dove into that data. It's 114 pages, but for those of you like me that like Cliff Notes, there are about 2 or 3 pages of summary that's at the very beginning. But do take a look at that. I wanna call out some of the statistics that got our attention. Okay, let me just read a few of them to you. Greenville County is worse than almost every county in the nation for helping poor and minority children out of poverty and up the economic ladder. Black household income is 56% of white household income. That is worse than the state and US average. 22.5% of Black children live in areas of concentrated poverty compared to 4.8% of white children. The infant mortality rate is twice as high for Black babies compared to white babies. 69% of white students meet or exceed the 3rd grade reading standard compared to 31% of Black students. Those are just some of what I would say are alarming statistics in Greenville County. And I think what's also important to note is that when Rheem started, there's clearly a lot of things going on across this nation. And we made a commitment to focus on racial equity and economic mobility in Greenville County, not Columbia, not Charleston, not Washington, D.C., in Greenville County. So we are focused on just this community right now. If we can all agree that it's a moral imperative that we get this right, there's also a pretty substantial economic argument as well. And that's something that our REEM Commission has spent some time talking about as well. Let me give you a couple of statistics around that. It's estimated that Greenville County is missing out on $3 billion in economic activity based on racial inequities. $3 billion with a B. In 2018, Kellogg Foundation estimated that racial disparities accounted for $42 billion in untapped economic productivity across this country. So again, moral imperative, no question. There's also an economic imperative. The better everybody in our community does, the better the community as a whole does. So that's where we started our work. We grounded our work, and we quickly realized that we also need to split this work up into some committees. And I'm going to turn it back to Merle for a second to talk about our 5 committees and what they've been working on now for the last, call it 16, 18 months. And then we'll talk about where we're headed from here. So Merle, I'm gonna turn it back to you to talk a little bit about the committees.
The 5 focus areas that we developed were education and workforce development, income and wealth as a committee, criminal justice, health and wellness, and community-wide learning. We found individuals in our community to lead those particular 5 focus areas, and let me tell you who they are. In the education and workforce development, Dr. Elizabeth Davis, president of Furman University, serves as co-chair. Stacy Mills is the, I think, vice chancellor at USC Upstate, and Stacy has helped with this particular committee, he and Elizabeth. On income and wealth, Will Whitley with Michelin North America is serving as co-chair. Engage Weeks, Hollingsworth Fund, is also serving as co-chair. In the criminal justice arena, Chief Howie Thompson, Greenville Police Department, serving as co-chair, and Dr. Karen Baines Dunning, community advocate, is serving as associate co-chair. Health and wellness, Dr. Shanice Chris from Furman University and Travelers Rest City Council serves as co-chair, and Deb Long of Bon Secure St. Francis Health System serves as the other co-chair. In community-wide learning, Tamala Spann, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives with Hollingsworth, is serving with Katie Smith, who is Greenville Partnership for Philanthropy Executive Director. Wanted you to know who some of those people are. I also wanted you to know that they have gone into the community and found experts in these areas to help them build the recommendations that we are going to present to the community. Each of these committees have been working for over 20 months, listening to each other, bringing in subject matter experts, and bringing in people who are affected by the policies and procedures that are existing now. Important. We needed to make certain that we are talking to the people that we are trying to assist. So rather than the government coming to help you, what do you really need? And that's the approach we've taken in regards to trying to help those. Now, let me give you a little background as to why I chose to get involved in this initiative. I told you a little bit about my hometown, but I'm born in the 40s. And the Civil Rights Act was passed in '63, I believe, going forward. I'm 16, 17 years old at the time. I want you to understand that Black folks in Seneca, South Carolina would graduate from high school on Thursday, and Friday they had a bus ticket in their hand because there were no jobs in Oconee County for people, for Black folks. You could be a janitor, you could drive the bus, you could be a gardener, but you couldn't doff cloth in the mill. You couldn't work in the mill in the early 60s and in most of my childhood. So I'm watching all of this as my friends left town because they couldn't make a living in Seneca, South Carolina. I told you a little bit, some of you may know, but in Seneca, South Carolina, as it was in most towns in the South, it was segregation for everything. Schools were segregated. My high school was not integrated until 1969 or 1970. When we have a school reunion now, the youngest member of our school is 70 years old. In another 10 years, there won't be much of us alive, if any of us alive. Segregation put us into that box. Just wanted you to understand, why am I so interested? I came to Greenville in 1971, I believe, and got a chance to get engaged and found that there were extraordinary human beings here who believed in some of the same things I believed in, were willing to work for it. That's why I joined all those organizations. That's why I was put to the leadership, because people there recognized I had a passion for changing the condition of lives of others. And I wanted to be at a city and a community that would do that. David mentioned earlier to you that this is about Greenville County for us. And the reason he wanted you to understand that is we recognize that we can't eat this elephant. We got to take small bites at this elephant And Greenville is a small bite as opposed to South Carolina. Some of the things that we know need changing will take legislative initiatives. We want to sure we've got that kind of clout that we can do so. But some of the statistics that David mentioned to you earlier, we can handle here in Greenville just by having the will. Having the right organizations at the table, having the right people at the table, we can do it here. That's why I chose to get involved. The leadership of Rheem has been extraordinary. This community has been extraordinary. People have been offering, how can I help? And we need to capitalize that for them so that we can make this work on a long-term basis.
Perfect. So I'm going to pick up a little bit on the work that the committees have been doing, and then talk to you a little bit about where we're headed post 2021. So I think what's also important to mention is each of the committees that Merle just referenced also had an external facilitator. I will also tell you that many of you on this phone know Nika White here in Greenville. We actually contracted with Nika to help what we've kind of called the leadership team, which is Merle and me and the 3 CEOs and some others that are moving this work forward. We tried to do it ourselves in the beginning, and we quickly realized that we were overwhelmed and we needed professional help. So Nika came in and helped us. But again, having the facilitators who are themselves subject matter experts in each of these 5 fields was really important. So the committees, I can't tell you how much time and energy they have been spending over the past, call it 16, 20 months building these recommendations. I mean, they have spent countless hours outside of commission meetings working on these recommendations. And in December, each of the 5 committees presented their recommendations that they started with a long list. And like Merle said, this is an elephant. We got to take bite-sized pieces. And so we encouraged each of the committees to kind of boil it down to somewhere between 3 and 5 recommendations that they think are the most important, the most impactful, and that we can accomplish in this community. So each of the committees have done that. We are in the process of refining each of those recommendations across all 5 committees and hope to release those to the public in late February, okay? One of the really important things that we talked about from the get-go of Rheem is this cannot be one of those commissions that has a lot of great conversations, has some really great recommendations. We put it in a notebook and it sits on a shelf and never goes anywhere. We just all said this cannot happen with this work in this community right now. So we have been thinking sustainability from the get-go. I could spend the next 30 minutes telling you the iterations of what conversations we had about that over, again, the last 16 months or so. But let me just get to kind of the bottom line there and tell you where we're headed there. So United Way, Megan Bart, United Way will serve as the backbone organization for Rheem. Okay, we talked about it becoming its own 501c3, and I know many of you are in that space. We thought, there's probably enough 501c3s in South Carolina, right? And we need to partner with many of those 501c3s that are already doing a lot of great work in this space. We don't need another one, but we do need an organization to help kind of support the work. So United Way of Greenville County will be the backbone organizations. The CEOs and the organizations of United Way, Greenville Chamber, and Urban League will collectively serve as the leadership of Rheem in a go-forward basis. We will form an advisory committee that will support the work, but definitely the work will be led by those 3 organizations partnering together. Maybe most importantly to those 3 CEOs, we are going to hire an executive director. And I think that's really, really important because we need someone waking up in this community every day, thinking about Rheem and how do we move these recommendations forward in this community. So we have now released the posting for that position. It's on United Way's website. It's on our Rheem website. It's in various other places. And we are now starting to get applicants for that executive director position. And I'm really interested and intrigued with some of the folks who have raised their hand for this position. We will start the interview process sometime in February, and I would hope by late February, more realistically into March, we would be in a position to announce the permanent executive director of REEM. So that's kind of where we are at this moment. Again, I can't say enough about the work that these committees have done, because that is truly where the rubber meets the road. How can we make changes in Greenville County? What do we have more control over than not? And they just did an unbelievable job. Interestingly enough, at our December meeting, which was kind of our wrap up for what we call REEM 1.0 and the kickoff for REEM 2.0, we went back and started calculating the number of hours that the commissioners met, both in commission meetings, committee meetings. We had external experts come and speak to our organizations from across the state. We actually had a couple of speakers from across the country who are experts in this work come speak to us. I mean, we put all of that on paper, and it's unbelievable the amount of time that this community has been spending in this work. So I'll pause there. That again, that's where we are at this moment. And then before we open it up to some questions, Merle, anything else you want to add about kind of REEM 2.0 and where we're headed?
I think you've covered that well, David. It is exciting to recognize that we have so many people interested in that position. It's exciting to recognize that we were able to reach out into the community in a very limited way and receive the financial support that we have so far in those who are willing to invest in the REEM Commission and executive director going forward. Let me share with you very briefly an epiphany for me. I happened to live in Canada for 5 years. And it was for me a new awakening coming from Seneca, South Carolina. They did not have and do not have slavery as a background as between Black folk and white folks of how they interact with each other. Therefore, at least in my mind, as the 5 years I spent in that country, I was treated just like a human being. People didn't like me because they didn't like me. It wasn't because they didn't like the color of my skin. They just didn't like me. I was all right. I'm good with that anywhere in the world. But it was a different feeling when they treated you like a human, invited you to their home, met you out. It was greetings, and it was different. And Greenville, South Carolina has that capacity to me. It opened up its arms and gave me a chance to participate and lead. I believe we can do the same kind of thing for the constituents of this community and help us build and grow this community to where we aren't leaving economics on the table. We aren't leaving people behind. We can make sure we all grow together. And thank you for this opportunity to address you.
Before we open it up for questions, one of the questions I do get from time to time is why I personally got involved. And clearly you heard Merle kind of talk about his why. I'll just share with you quickly my why, and then we'll again open it up for some questions, and I hope we'll have some engaging conversation. So I grew up in Greenville. I grew up in an upper class family in downtown Greenville. I did not struggle the way some of you on this phone may have struggled growing up. I did not struggle the way I have personal friends that struggled growing up. I did not have those same life experiences. So I can never fully appreciate what some of those circumstances were and are in this community. I do think my parents gave me a pretty good foundation on what's fair, what's right, and maybe most importantly, what's wrong. I will tell you, I take pride in this, but I think this is partly inspiration that my grandfather, who I did not know, he passed away before I was born, was a doctor in Clinton, South Carolina, about 45 minutes from here, halfway between Greenville and Columbia, and opened the first integrated medical clinic in Clinton in the late 40s, which is, you heard Merle talk about dates. That was an unpopular thing to do in that community at that time, and also hired the first Black nurse in that community and made house calls in the Black community. So I've always taken inspiration from his story. I've watched personal friends that I went to high school with unnecessarily struggle, both in high school and still today. When Carlos and Sean and Megan approached Merle and me, my respect for all of them made me say, I got to get engaged in this work. Right, wrong, fair or unfair, I think the visual of George Floyd had a much more profound impact on me than any conversation I'd ever had prior to that moment. That is definitely something that will resonate for me, and kind of was one of those moments like, all right, I got to get in the game personally. This is clearly not right. So that definitely was something that weighed on me. I love Greenville. I grew up here. I've lived here most of my life. I love Greenville. There are so many wonderful things about our community, but I'm sitting in downtown Greenville right now, and I can look out the window, and you don't have to go very far to find a community that is not enjoying the main street of Greenville that many of us get to enjoy. How do we make sure that we change that? And then I also just, we talked about the economic imperative. I just have a core belief that the better people do in our community, the better the community does as a whole. And so, all of those things for me kind of come together, and those are my whys, right? That's what drives my desire to get engaged in this work 16, 18 months ago and continue for much longer than the next 12 months, that's for sure. So, all right, we'll pause there. And again, Madeline, if there have been questions in the chat, I have no idea what they are, but if anybody wants to come off mute and ask questions, please.
So we do have some questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to talk, you can go ahead. All right, so I'm just gonna go with the questions in the chat. So one from Eileen Chepanek, excuse me if I mispronounce your name. She says, "This is awesome. Are you in touch with Charleston City Councils for an equity commission?"
So the short answer is not really. Certainly, we've had some conversations with Darren Goss about this work. And clearly he's engaged in the work in Charleston. I have kind of personally kept up with some of the articles, and I don't pretend to know the politics in Charleston. We have tried our best in Greenville to keep the politics on the sideline as much as possible. I know that's not easy to do. But we have tried really hard to do that. And again, just really focus on the data. So I have seen some of the challenges that Charleston has had in this conversation that I think, knock on wood, we fortunately have been able to avoid up to this point. But we have not partnered with them in any formal or really informal way.
So this is Debbie Nelson, and I just thank both of you for sharing your remarks today. This has been fantastic. And we do have a number of questions. I really, in particular, want to ask this one that Tamika asked, and I'm trying to find it now. Yes, here it is. Thank you, Tamika, and she's from Columbia, Tamika Devine. With the recent national and local conversations about not teaching about critical race theory, how do you get buy-in from people who think talking about it is divisive? And I know you just mentioned politics, and you're trying to stay away from the fray of politics, though it's often difficult to do. So have you found this to be a challenge with the work that you're doing with Rheem?
Certainly we've had to deal with the issue of critical race theory as those in this community understand what that means. There are many different definitions. We have a racial index glossary from the REEM Commission that tries to explain what some of these buzzwords actually mean. For me, as I understand critical race theory, is that you don't want to make anyone feel bad or ostracized for the conduct of grandparents and others going back centuries. If I understand critical race theory, and forgive me, I lack the intelligence to fully understand, because critical race theory gets changed every definitional period. what I will suggest to you is this. If you are telling me that critical race theory does not belong, then you're telling me that facts aren't important. Because all we're doing is talking about the facts. We don't have to make up anything about slavery. It was there. We don't have to make up anything about Jim Crow. It happened. Now, how does your grandchildren respond to what their great granddaddy did? I don't know. But the facts are. We cannot change that. My thought process is when I got on this commission was to not repeat history and to beat people up over history, but let's talk about our future. Let's deal with the issues as they existed at the time and change that for our future, not casting blame, but trying to assert what David talked about is giving all folk in this community a chance to succeed and thrive. Can we remove those barriers today? And so that's been my focus on what I've been trying to do. I don't try to explain things to folks who don't want to listen.
Yeah, and Tamika, good to see you again. Thank you for being on this morning, and I appreciate your question. And Tamika knows this, and my older brother lives in Columbia and recently ran and was elected to the Richland County School Board, Richland 1. And as you can imagine, critical race theory was a hot topic of conversation on the campaign trail. So I appreciated hearing from him the challenge in having that conversation. I will tell you, so Merle mentioned the racial glossary. You know, clearly when we started this work, we needed to level set what some of these words mean. And some of these words have become, what's the word I want to use? They've become lightning rods, right? And what I, frankly, personal opinion, not on behalf of Rheem, personal opinion, unfortunately, people use these words as lightning rods and they really don't understand the history of it, or they don't understand the definition of it, okay? I will tell you one thing that we did as a commission. We had a couple of what we call lunch and learns where we got on the phone and it was, you know, commissioners dialed in and clearly didn't record anything and just had some open and honest conversations and allowed people to ask questions in a safe space, right? Critical race theory clearly became one of those topics that we realized we needed to have a lunch and learn in and of itself on just that topic, which we did. And I think everybody appreciated being able to come to that meeting, not clearly understanding what critical race theory meant. They just kind of heard it on mainstream media, one side or the other. And I think that was a very impactful session for folks to really level set on what that means. And it's kind of one of those things we did that in a bubble, right? So there's, call it 20 to 25 folks who participated in that conversation and I think walked away better educated. And that's the kind of thing I hope over time we can do with greater segments of our Greenville County community. But I do think that conversation certainly helped at the commission level.
I saw in the chat room, someone asked a question about the glossary. I believe it is on our website, David, correct me if I'm wrong.
It should be, yeah.
The Rheem website is www.reemgvl.org. Repeat, reemgvl.org is the website. And I believe the glossary, David, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the glossary is on our website, correctly?
It should be, but whoever's asking that question, if it's not for some reason, shoot us a note and we'd be happy to send it out.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I do agree that that's a really important tool for anybody doing this work. Here's a question, and maybe for both of you. Is there an opportunity for South Carolina's corporate leaders who believe in this work to come together across the state? Or, I mean, are there any efforts like that going on? I know this is a local commission and we're focused on Greenville County, and you've made that point. But as we entered this conversation, I think Mal was talking about our relationship with Boeing, and we're going to have a conversation with them on one of these upcoming calls. Is there an opportunity for us to do this work collectively from, bringing the corporate sector together? Again, we're nonprofits, but what do you think?
That is what we're hoping for. At least in the Greenville community, we've had two major corporations reach out to us because they knew David and they knew me, and say, hey, how can I help? And we didn't include them on these committees. They weren't upset. They just would say, if you need me, give us a call. And as I told you before, we were excited about the revenue we were able to raise in a very short period of time without really any effort. So we think that we will be reaching out to our corporate community, and we think that they will be responsive.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Debbie, you asked a great question. Can we expand this work beyond Greenville County and partner in a more focused way across the state? I'm like Merle, I hope at some point we can. Selfishly, we're going to spend our time at this moment moving Rheem forward in Greenville County. We would love to meet with other organizations across the state who are working on this work in their communities. We've clearly had Spartanburg in to talk to us about some of the things that they've done or learned over the course of their journey. And again, like you mentioned, Charleston, certainly know they're working very hard in this space as well. I don't know what that partnership necessarily looks like. I definitely believe that corporate engagement and involvement will be important, whether we're talking about Greenville County or the state of South Carolina. That has to be a component of what we're doing, and for lots of different reasons. But clearly our corporate community are hiring and employing a lot of people across the state, across this community. So we've got to make sure that they're at the table and helping us in this work. And frankly, I think it's a pretty good time to get them engaged. I mean, they're clearly companies that have been engaged for many, many years and have a long history of it. And there's some who maybe haven't historically gotten engaged, but the last year or two have them raising their hands to do more, both within their companies and across the community. So we need to take advantage of that. Well, one other thing Merle mentioned something that had me thinking about it. We've had so many people in this community that weren't necessarily part of the commission raise their hand to get engaged in this work. And that has been really, really neat to see. And frankly, I will tell you, some people reached out to me personally and said, hey, I'm interested in helping. And if I had to pick whether I thought they would ever reach out to me or not, I probably would have put them in the probably not category. And so that was exciting for me to see. The other thing that's probably most important about what Rheem has done is this has given a platform for this conversation. We are hearing people talk about things in this community because Rheem exists. Merle and I have had the opportunity to look at some YouTubes where white pastors in predominantly white Baptist churches are talking about Rheem and this work from the pulpit. And that's, look, that was a big win. So it's been exciting to see the conversation that Rheem has helped create in this community.
I see a comment from our colleague, Bob Morris, saying that getting corporate and government procurement commitments for Black-owned businesses is a priority, it was interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Bob. I guess there's some interest in hearing about this executive director position and what Rheem decided is going to be, the backbone will be United Way, but having someone that wakes up every morning, like living and breathing this. One of the things we've been hearing a lot about this work is salaries and publishing salaries, and that being an equitable practice. And so someone, I guess, went and looked while we were on the call and said there's not a salary. Is that something y'all have considered including? And maybe I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but I know
I'm gonna let David handle that hot potato. but I can say to you that the amount of the revenue we've been able to raise so far gives us an idea of the kind of range that we need to be in to hire that executive director who has the expertise and all of the factors that we know to give us a chance to be successful. We know we are talking, at least in my mind, we have not discussed this as a REEM Commission, but in my mind, we talking 150, 100 up and probably on up. This is going to be huge work, and we've got to hire a staff. I mean, it's going to be expensive and it's going to be hard work, but we believe, as I said before, we didn't go out reaching for folks to give us any money. Folks volunteered to help us. So we think if we do have a campaign to raise some dollars, that we'll be able to come up with a sufficient sum to get the kind of person that we need.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bob Morris. Bob was one of our commissioners. I also see Tamala Spann on. She was one of our commissioners, and there may be others, but they're not showing on my screen, so I apologize if I didn't recognize them. But so great question, Debbie. Frankly, we haven't talked about specific dollars for the executive director salary yet. I will tell everybody on this phone that we are willing to spend the money that is required to get the most talented person in this seat and give them the best chance for success, period. United Way, Community Foundation of Greenville, Hollingsworth Foundation, and some others have already made some pretty substantial commitments, not only for the next year, but in some cases 3 years, because we want to make sure that we have a good runway for this new executive director to not have to worry about raising money to pay their salary the next year. We need them coming on board and focused on moving this work forward. So Merle and I have joked about this. I'm more optimistic even than he is about our ability to raise the necessary funding for this work. And frankly, I think we can get a majority, if not all of it, from this local community. That said, I think this model has a pretty unique opportunity to go and get national foundation money, right? Not only the subject of this work, but the fact that 3 organizations in this community have come together to move this work forward. I think it's a pretty interesting story, and maybe we can attract some national foundation dollars because of the work that we're doing here and how we're doing it.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for tackling that question and something to think about as you're promoting this position. So thank you for that. I see Madeline has a comment. Madeline, did you want to, I'd love for you to unmute. Did you want to say something about Charleston? Oh, she's muted.
There she
No,
is.
I hid my view and I can never figure out how to unmute. I forget to go down and look in the lower left-hand corner. I was just commenting that the city of Charleston has had a commission working on this that's been, has had nonprofit leaders, and maybe there's some others from Charleston that were involved in this, but they did the apology several years ago. They had the city council adopt a policy, an apology for all that it had done, because the city's history, for many years, it made significant money off of slaves and the slave trade, and much of the city was built by slaves. I was at that city council meeting where they adopted by a narrow margin that apology that included doing further work in terms of this. But that staff person they have hired is sitting in city government, not outside in a private partner collaboration like yours. And I'm thinking that your leader will have more power being part of a nonprofit corporate collaboration than sitting in city government, where he or she reports to a council that's so politically driven. So I just commend you for putting it doing it the way you're doing it.
Yeah, so we're seeing this work. I know we're about to go to Spartanburg for our summit in just a short month, and a lot of what we're going to focus on in Spartanburg is what they've been doing with their racial equity collaborative. And I believe that you all had some conversations with Spartanburg early on in your process. Is that true?
That is, yeah. Dr. Booker and some of his colleagues came and spent probably a good hour and a half with us at one of our commissioner meetings and kind of shared their story, shared what worked, some tough lessons learned and things they would do differently. But they have definitely been good thought partners as we've just kind of at the beginning of our journey.
Well, I know there are lots more chats going on in the chat box, but we so appreciate your time today. I promised you we'd be out in an hour, and we could go on all day. And thank you so much for sharing your time. And I guess hearing Merle's stories, Judge Code's stories, hearing about the intentionality of this group that's been brought together in Greenville, and really, to me, what's so hopeful is the leadership, but how you're planning for the future to keep it moving, because I think there's such a a fear in this work that we start it and we do a lot of what your commission was afraid was going to happen. You know, you talk and you build reports and so forth, and it's not going to go forward. So I'm really hopeful as a resident of Greenville and of the South Carolina as the ideas of keeping this momentum going, because it's not 20-month work. And as Megan, said by mistake, it's 20-year, 100-year work. It's things that we have to keep doing. And we just so appreciate your leadership in Greenville doing this, and the other commissioners that are on the phone as well. So thank you for your candid conversation and sharing it. I'm sure you'd be available for folks that might have questions about what Rheem is doing and some of the, as Spartanburg shared with you, some of the hiccups along the way, because I'm sure you had many of those as well as you're moving forward. So thank you, David. Thank you, Merle, for joining us today. And thank you to all of you that are on the line. I don't know if you have any final words, Madeline. You can wave your hand if you have any.
Thank you all. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it's just so great to hear from both of you in my hometown of Greenville. And again, I invite you, both of you, and of course those on the line to attend our summit. This work is work that we're committed to at Together SC through conversations like this, but through all of our professional development opportunities. And our summit is March 9th through 11th in Spartanburg. And we're focusing a good bit on this work that you shared with us today. I think Merle used this word earlier. The theme for our conference is urgency. It's the urgency of now. These words come from Dr. Martin Luther King, but there couldn't be a time that this work is not more urgent. I mean, it's been urgent for 400 years, but it couldn't be a time more urgent with everything that's been going on in our country, especially since the pandemic started. So we invite you all to come. There's still some spots. They're going fast. If you're interested in being at the summit and you haven't signed up, there's a chance that you may not have everything available to you. We are trying to be really safe. This is a year of COVID. We will be meeting in person, but we are requiring vaccinations, and we are going to have masks there for everyone to wear. So we're going to be very safe. So we have limited the number of seats. We're only going to have 400 people at a conference that often has upwards of 700 or 800 people. So please sign up today. I wanted to give a shout out to Tamala Span. I don't know if she's still on the call, but she's one of the members of our committee, our host committee in Spartanburg, led by Molly Talbot Metz and Mary Thomas. Want to warm welcome to see you all in Spartanburg. And thank you again to Merle and David for spending their morning. And thank you to Megan, who I think had to run off to a board meeting. So I don't think Megan's still here, but thank you to Megan Barb, our friend at United Way of Greenville County, for doing the introduction. So with that, I bid you all farewell. Have a great day. And we look forward to our next conversation, Removing Our Blinders, which will be in April. We have our conference in March, and our next one will be in April with Mayor Riley. Mayor Riley of Charleston will be our next featured speaker, and I'm delighted to have him share his story. So thank you, everyone.